Number five. Number five that we had in there, and this will probably make it pretty sweet after what we were just talking about before with Djakovic. West Coast, 1993, 21 touches, 15 marks, 5 goals, and that would have been playing on Djakovic. And quite funnily enough, to actually refute what you said before, we actually won that game in Perth.
Oh, right. Did we?
We did.
I think that was yes, that was.
You kicked 5 goals, and you kicked 5 goals.
Yeah, that was, and from memory, Corey, and the only reason why I do remember, because I did say, Jacko and Jacko has a real good memory. I think that was the first time we ever played on one another. And from memory, from what Jacko said after the game, Mick Malthouse pulled Jacko into the locker, sat down and said, hey, son. It's a bit like Dennis. Hey, son, you know what? You better work out, what you did right and wrong today, because you're going to be playing on that bloke for the next 10 years. So, there's your challenge. And, he clearly did a bit of work, because he got me on a fair few occasions. So, yeah, it was, and I rate that purely because that was the start of us becoming a really good team, cause. And West Coast coming off a premiership, and winning in Perth. So in Perth against a young champion in Djakovic, and against the reigning premier, I rate that right up there as obviously one of the better performances that I had in my career, and early in my captaincy.
Yeah. The next one, number 4, and again, there's a couple of games in here, and I must take it. I'll let you explain this. So this was the 1999 Port Adelaide final at the MCG, having 24 possessions in the wet, 11 marks, 18 of those were contested. Now, just give everyone an insight out there about your childlike, the way that you used to go about wet weather footy, and when we go to training and say, right, it's a great night for sliders.
Yeah, well, people used to say, if it was raining in a particular game, and I loved playing in the wet. And Dennis sort of worked that out way back in the under-19s, because I played obviously my first year at North in the under-19s under Dennis, and it was raining one day, and I took a heap of marks, and I think he was very shocked, because being a key position player, it's not normally I guess it's not the norm. But as a kid, my eldest brother, Dick, when it used to pour, and when I say pour, I mean thunderstorms, rain, lightning, everything. And, remember the ovals, you just go to a local oval and it'd be just covered in water. And we'd go down there and just kick the ball in the air and run and dive and slide for metres in the wet. And he'd kick balls at me, and, I'd pick them up and, and then kick it over my head. So you run back with the flight and mark it on your chest and slide. It was just good fun. But invariably
is that where the whole running back with the flight of it actually came from? Was doing that with Dick, or was that just a mindset thing? I was just going to come in.
No, the running back with the flight of the ball is not. It's got nothing to do with courage or anything like that. It's what it is. It's pulling out of the lead at the right time to get back to where the ball's going. So some players will just continue to lead up, and also then turn around and sort of go back. Whereas I was always watching the kicker, so I'm reading the body language of the kicker. So if I could see that the kicker was going to kick it to me, and by his body language, his eyes, everything, I'd lead. And as soon as I thought, no, he's not going, I'd pull out of the lead and wheel and turn back, and invariably get back to where the ball was going there before you could run back with the flight of the ball.
There is a very famous one, if you remember from that game, Matty Capuano he was on 50 metres, and that illustrates your point to a T, that you initially, he ignored you, and even the commentators basically said, oh, why is he ignoring you? You go out a shot, and then you run back with the flight of it and take running back with the flight, mark it in the goal square.
Yeah, and actually, I do remember that vividly, obviously, because doing this exercise, I thought about the games, and I was absolutely clear. I mean, Matty Cap, let's be honest though, ruckman, You know, they're not they're not designed to think on their feet necessarily. Oh, you're a different ruckman. I exclude you from that conversation. I always do when I talk about ruckman. You're a very different type, along with Jimmy Steins, different type, but different to you. Matty Cap, obviously, if he didn't see me, he's blind. But once again, I could tell by his body language, and I let him know by my body language that I wasn't happy while I was turning around to go back. By my body language, that he should have kicked it in shorter, but because I read it quick enough, I was able to get back to where the ball was going and invariably mark it. So that's what that skill set is. And I've spoken to forwards over the last decade or so, even in the modern game, and talked to them about being able to read those types of situations to get back. And if you don't get back to take the mark, Corey, what can you be? You can be front and square.
Yeah.
So therefore, you're able to still be involved in the game. Even if it's not a marking contest.
Yeah. And get on to number 3, the 94 Hawthorn drawn final. Now, I had to do a double take on this that even I find pretty impressive, and I don't usually impress that easily. Playing centre-half forward and having 32 possessions, 10 marks and 4 goals is, nearly a normal day. At 32 possessions playing centre-half forward, that's pretty good going.
Yeah, I think and that was a big moment for us because that was our first finals win. And little did we know that it would send us straight into a prelim. We got the week off.
Good for you.
Hey, yeah. Well, I went into the game under an injury cloud as well, which is why I rated that game highly. Not the 32 possessions, but because I was under an injury cloud, hadn't trained much, and a final.
Can you, just explain to everyone the injury that you had, because it was a pretty weird injury. It was a soleus, if my memory serves me correct. The funny thing with the soleus is that you can, when you jog, it hurts, but when you run flat out, it doesn't. Yeah,
well, the main calf takes over. The main muscle in the calf takes over when you sprint, but when you're just walking or jogging, the soleus. So, in ideal circumstances, you would have missed games, but and if I remember, and I had a couple of those injuries over my career, and they're sore, and I guess it's just a good indicator. Don't jog around or don't walk, sprint. But yeah, that game has really fond memories. Obviously, the first draw that goes into extra time.
Yeah.
And then to have our first finals win was pretty special. And from all, and we from memory, we flogged Hawthorn that year in the home and away. We had a massive win against them.
25 points, I think.
Yeah. So, what an effort it was by them. And they had, obviously the likes of Darren Jarman and Platt and Dunstall. So, they were an awesome opponent. So to beat them in a final, having so much respect for that footy club, once again, a bit like West Coast, they'd won, premierships of recent time as well. So, to win that one was really, really fond memories.
Yeah. And the other one that comes out of that, if David King had gone back and maybe kicked the ball a little bit quicker, because he had Longmire, Carey, McKernan all in the goal square, we mightn't have gone to extra time.
Exactly right. And I was fairly once again with body language, letting Kingy know that he should have got back a bit quicker. But it all turned out in the end. Obviously we got up in extra time, but it really does bring back happy memories, doesn't it? I started in 1989, and then that was my first finals win in 1994. So, it was really happy.
Yeah. And the next one, it's this one's probably nearly one of my bigger favourites, because there is a little bit of a backstory to it. The 1997 final against Geelong, where you kicked 7 out of the 11 goals, had 23 possessions, 10 marks. And for people that actually saw that game, it was as wet as anything. But I think what I do remember about that week is that Ben Graham did actually say he might have had your measure a little bit during the week. And there's not many times I used to be able to tell with your preparation that when you're on song, but I could tell you when you're a little bit more businesslike than usual. And on this occasion, it was a case of, Benny, you poked the bear, mate. You're going to pay for it.
Look, and the reason why I rate this game so highly, because 97, we won the premiership in 96, obviously. First round in 97, I dislocate my shoulder. I have a shoulder reconstruction. I got back in 10 weeks to play the second part of the season. But I played that half a season at centre half back.
Yeah.
Not at centre half forward. And come closer to the finals, and in the finals, Dennis said, "Well, we're going to put you back to centre half forward." And but in all honesty, I had one arm. When you say I took 10 marks, I'm not sure how. I'd love to sit down and watch the whole thing, because I obviously can't remember. I remember obviously kicking 7 goals, but to take 10 marks in the wet, and like I said, and seriously had one arm, I couldn't lift one arm above shoulder height. That's why I rate the game so highly, and in the wet as well. But once again, we touched on that, the fact that I love the wet. So yeah, it was that game arguably, could have been my best, just because of the circumstances. A final, injured, and on the captain of Geelong, who, by the way, I don't think I'd ever played on really before. I think he might have knew that I wasn't 100% fit, and I guess it was a good lesson for players not to sort of make those sort of comments before you play a game.
Yeah, it probably wasn't the wisest move. Which now leads me onto our number one game. Now, there was a lot of games obviously we could choose from. Special mention games, I think there was the 93 Essendon Friday night. There was some Hawks games in there. There was even a 94 Western Bulldogs game out at Whitten Oval. So, yeah, there are a lot of games that we can choose from, but we've nailed it down to this one. I think from a complete game as far as marking and your follow-up, and I suppose all the other factors added in of the Bombers, where you were dealing with Barnard, Solomon and Barry Young. They basically made it known, I think, that they were going to go after you. So we're just going to throw to the footage now. I think it's about 6 or 7 minutes in. I've already fed you a goal, by the way, so I've got a good start.
Yeah, look, the thing about when we had Bombers games, as you know, we always got up for them. We had a great rivalry. They were a really good team at this point. So were we. They sent Barnard. I found out this afterwards. But Kevin Sheedy made a point that he wanted their back line to target me and be really physical with me, which, I don't think they'd sort of done before. So they wanted to see whether that would work, I guess. But Barnard was my first opponent on that day. There's a bit of push and shove, but I always felt when teams tried to be like that, I just think it sharpens your focus. It sort of makes you, I guess, even more determined in some ways. So, I always felt that if someone did that to me, I certainly made me maybe go a little bit harder. But they were just such a good team and such a great rival that it was always good to, and I think I kicked 10 goals in that game. But I had influences in other ways that I rate really highly. I think there was a massive crowd there that day. I think it was a Saturday afternoon.
68,000, I think.
Yeah, 68,000, So, really, really good, big game. Obviously the G, as I said, and I think that was the best individual performance that I'd sort of gave in saying that it wasn't a final. I felt pretty good going into it. But yeah, I fond memories, although we did lose the game. And I do remember Lloydie kicking 7 at the other end. And he was pretty special as well. And Corey, you were good that day. It was just you know what it was? It was just a great game. Even though we got beaten.
Like, especially like when you look back at this footage, as you said, it ended up being a pretty high scoring game. Like, do you think, especially with the way that was the game played, where you're being most of the time isolated, one out, like could you sense if you're on someone and you felt like you're on, invariably, you know, I mean, a lot of the time anyway, you tell me to get the hell out of the way. But if you knew that you really had someone, was that something in your head where you just go, I want as much room so I can go to work here?
Yeah, I mean, one of our if you want to call it tactics calls, as you know, was to, and I think one of the things that you try to do to a defence, and that is you want to isolate defenders. You don't want them to be able to support one another. And even in the modern game, you see, you know, players, you know, guarding space, so to speak, and being able to get over and be that third man up to spoil. And you know, no different to when, you know, if you had an opponent that I felt that, you know, you could certainly manipulate and be stronger than, then, you know, it was my job to give you that room to do this, you know, to do the same thing. And I think that's what, you know, what we talked about earlier today, and that is understanding and making players around you better, and understanding when they're on, you give them, you know, their space, and try to draw players out of you know, the space that they want to go into. And yeah, it was you know, that was always, wasn't just you know, I know it might have seemed that way sometimes, of course, but isolate me and my man. But clearly the opposition always knew that we were trying to isolate yourself or me or Horse. So the opposition knew what we were trying to do, but at time, you know, that can be difficult to stop.
And there was this boomer on the screen there. He played 58 games there. He went on to play another 400 after that. So, but I think it was interesting. Solomon basically, even though Boom ended up with that free kick, then I think you could tell the way that they tried to tackle you and hit you, and then it's just bubbling along nicely. All this this little bit of angst that in the end it kicks off very shortly.
Well, and that's the thing about when a coach asks you to go out and do something that is manufactured and doesn't come natural, then your focus can go off what you're there to do, and that is to win the footy, beat your opponent. But if they clearly went out there with a focus to upset me, then that was always going to give my teammates other opportunities, because they would have a focus on me at particular times, and a couple of occasions that's how it turned out. But I will say, Sheed's certainly the guys that Sheed spoke to about doing it. It was in their nature. Let's be honest. When
you had Barnard, Solomon, and Barry Young all back there, and quite the funny, you know, this day when I actually had a look at this, you had Barnard, Solomon, and Barry Young back there,
and Hardwick.
We had Dimmer, but then the funny thing was, the other one who was probably the maddest of the lot was Dean Wallace. He was playing forward. There he is.
Yeah, he did end up playing on me for a little bit that day.
Yeah.
But yeah, he didn't start there. I never played a lot on Spotty, Dean. Got to know him after footy. Really nice guy, actually. But you know, he's actually a guy that had a fair bit of talent, but had a lot of injuries. But yeah, no, they, like I said, there were a lot of similarities about that Bombers team and our great teams. Had a little bit of mongrel, and they had some real class in, obviously, you know, Lloyd and Hurd and these guys. So you know, once again, really good memories and games that you really wanted to be a part of.
Just giving him a nice bit of honest feedback there. I
Yeah.
think I think she's about to kick off any second. I think there's a free kick that's actually given at the centre bounce that goes directly to you. So what happened? Did Solomon kick you? Because he got
Yeah,
reported.
yeah. There was a knee. They tried to knee me in the thigh, I think it was, or the back of the leg. So give me a corky, and there's my. I think it was that Peter Carey there. Maybe my namesake gave me a free because we have to say.
I reckon it was. Remember Hayden Kennedy? Yeah, Hayden Carey. We actually found out years later actually barracked for North Melbourne.
Yes, yeah, it was Solly, and I've got to know Solly quite well. He's a ripping fella, but they all
Yeah,
had a bit of mongrel in them, didn't they? And
yeah. Well,
and this is where it all kicks off. And look, a little bit of push and shove, and the thing about this, and I know, not promoting. But all of this sort of stuff, I just think, adds to the spectacle of our game. No one got hurt. It's sort of showing.
there's a here getting in your face.
Yeah, yeah, Baz, and isn't it? And I keep saying this, but one of the nicest guys ever.
Yeah, no, it's a
He
great
really,
man.
yeah, he really is one of the and yet if I'd seen him outside, or we ran into one another, on this particular day, and then after, all of those blokes, we had a hatred for them, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
We really hated these guys. We really loved playing against them, and then you get to know them afterwards and realise they're ripping blokes. We would have loved those guys in our team, although I'm not sure they would have got a game, of course.
And then actually, so you've noticed in these games that where's Mick Martin? How come he's not playing on Big Baddy Lloyd?
Yeah, he missed a few of these big games, didn't he?
Did he come up with a hammy because he didn't want to play on Lloydie?
Look, in Mick's defence,
we'll get back to him, by the way.
Yeah, I know, but in Mick's defence, I would argue the likes of. I'm trying to think of the fullbacks of that time. Let's say Mick Martin, Chris Langford, come to mind straight away. Even I guess you put Djakovic, but all of these defenders during that era. I see that. I'm just giving a little bit back to Barnard there, but
just a bit of an ear massage.
Yeah, which was all within the rules back then, just a free kick. But all of these defenders, and Mick Martin, as I said, he had to play from week to week. Gary Ablett Senior, you had obviously Lockett, you had Dunstall, you had Alan Djakovic, who for a period of 50 games was as hot as anyone in the game. You had the likes of Barry Stoneham as well. Obviously for Geelong, you had Stewie Lowe as well. I mean, Stephen Kernahan. He had to play on these guys week after week after week.
Yeah.
And I would argue that he beat them more than they beat him. And that's an incredible effort. I think, Mick, and we like to have a bit of fun with Mick because we can, but he did an unbelievable job for us. We needed a big, strong guy like him because in a lot of ways, Flossie did a great job. He was a centre-half forward, went back to centre-half back. But in a lot of ways, we were sort of lied on for, that big, strong guy that could take the big, strong forward of the opposition. And Mick did that every week for us. Arch played above his size every week.
You actually missed Barnard there. You actually didn't. Your fist went over his head.
Yeah, I think it might have been a deliberate over his head, but the elbow might have clipped the top of the head.
I just copped a little bit of a clip on the way through that gives me a lovely head bandage for the rest of the game.
Yeah, they're always a good look. The Joel Selwood look.
And Robert Scott, I think he got the free kick after I went off the ground because of the blood rule.
Yeah, well, and he's another great story. Dennis Pay, Robert Scott obviously was a fantastic player at Geelong, and he was a part of my good mate leaving North and your good mate Brad Scholl. So he was involved in that trade. So Scholl went to Geelong, and we got Scotty, who, by the way, another one of those guys. As we have a look at the free kick there, definitely free kick cause. But Scotty was another one of those guys that had a real professionalism about how he went about his training.
Yeah, he did.
And he was an integral part. Him and John Blakey, who we got from other teams, were great.
I don't mean to cut you off, but you know what's coming soon. There it is.
Yep. Yeah. Look,
Is that the best goal you've ever kicked?
Degree of difficulty, I think, but there's probably goals that you kick from outside 50 and from different angles and on the run and all that sort of stuff. But I guess because it's on your opposite side, it's a check side, it's a banana kick or a check side. It depends on what state you're from. Under pressure. If you have a look, Corey, if you just that vision, I do look to the top of the square. Yeah. And as you can see, there's Dustin Fletcher and there's I think 2 or 3 other Essendon players. So there was certainly no one to kick it to. So as Dennis Pagan used to say, you live and die by the sword.
And there's that lovely bandage I've got around my head.
Yep. And I thought, I'll have a ping. I have a ping. You had a few of those bandages over your career.
No, it's just my big ears made them stand out. So it was.
You had the cauliflower ears.
Yeah. Now, I think my producer, Angela, I think we're going for about another couple of minutes. There's only one other guy I do want to show you in a passage of play, just to illustrate. He was a favourite of mine. Was Abraham.
Yeah, as you can hear, little Carter crying in the background. Yeah, that's all right. Winston Abraham was an absolute gun. Absolute gun. I mean, if you talk about someone that could just glide across the ground, he was one, wasn't he, Corey? And when he got the ball in space, your eyes lit up. You just went, wow, you're going to get it lace out. He was just a great player to play with. I really loved Winnie. Really good guy too. Really good guy around the club, and fantastic. And you can see there 2 steps.
Watch. 2 steps. Yeah. That's every bit of 55 metres there.
Yeah. No, he was you know what he was? He was a beautiful player. Beautiful player to watch. Took Mark of the Year one year in Canberra. He was just a great player.
He didn't do what you did. I think you turned some of your awards into footy trip money. I think Winnie kept all that. That's fair enough too. When he mightn't have been getting paid as much as me, so that's fair enough.